Thank you for the opportunity to speak to the class of 2006. I'm sure you've had your fill of lectures, but in the fine tradition of academia, you'll have to endure one more before we push you out the door into the real world. I say real world for a reason. And with that, my comments today will center on what I consider a profound quote. Although he is a prominent American economist, political writer, and commentator, and a senior fellow at Stanford's Hoover Institute, many of your professors probably have never shared with you any of Thomas Sowell's writing because he's a black conservative. My favorite of Dr. Sowell's musings is this: the most fundamental fact about the ideas of the political left is that they do not work. Therefore, we should not be surprised to find the left concentrated in institutions where ideas do not have to work in order to survive. It so happens that Dr. Sowell was talking about the very place you're sitting now. He's talking about some of your teachers, and we're both challenging the value of some of what you've been taught. As you're now receiving your diplomas, it's obvious that what I'm about to tell you is kind of after the fact. Unfortunately, timing is everything. Some of the people I hang with consider some elements of liberalism, the philosophy you've received a healthy dose of these last few years, to be socialism. To back this up, let me read to you some of the current communist goals as written in The Naked Communist by Cleon Skousen. Develop the illusion that total disarmament by the United States would be a demonstration of moral strength. The problem is there's no guarantee the other side would play by those same rules of virtue. And when it comes to an enemy with nukes, you don't have the luxury of a second chance. Promote the UN as the only hope for mankind. If its charter is rewritten, demand that it be set up as a one-world government with its own independent armed forces. Now, I know you've all heard this before. I get into email arguments all the time with people who believe that the United Nations is the end-all, be-all, and that we should all hold hands, sing, and become a world nation. One problem: the United Nations currently has a long and lousy record when it comes to conflict resolution. In fact, they are a body that can be bought, a la oil for food scandal. They cover up numerous internal crimes worldwide, such as child rape and pornography in African countries, where they are charged with keeping the peace. I'm sure your professor told you about that, right? Capture one or both of the political parties in the United States. One down. Use technical decisions of the courts to weaken basic American institutions by claiming their activities violate civil rights. Just read any of the cases the ACLU gets involved with. It almost always involves some issue that is seldom in the best interests of America and her citizens as a whole. Ask anyone whom they have sued. You'll meet one someday. And let's get to familiar territory. Get control of the schools. Use them as transmission belts for social and current communist propaganda. Soften the curriculum. Get control of the teachers' associations. Put the party line in textbooks. Believe it or not, people, you've been fed a big dose of socialist propaganda. Think about it. On one note, you're told that your campus is a place that encourages the free expression of ideas. Sounds nice if it were true. Yet you've been encouraged by your teachers to shout down those with whom you disagree. You can recite. Yeah, like that's mature. You've been taught to be tolerant of other people and ideas. Yet some of you have not been discouraged from acting like spoiled children. I'm talking to those of you who've stood and turned your backs on me here today in silent protest. Man, do I wish I had a bucket of tomatoes. If my arguments were so abhorrent, you'd think your professor would want you to hear me just to prove their point. Could it be that logic and rational thought is kryptonite to the liberal ideal, thus a threat to their authority over a bunch of starry-eyed, impressionable, naive post-teens? Use student riots to foment public protests against programs or organizations which are under communist attack. How many times do you see students arrested in mass protests? Where are the teachers? Usually nowhere to be found, but then again, they call themselves conscientious objectors during wartime. In other words, they are pussies who will put kids, you, at risk just so they can feel relevant. Sad, but there's more. Continue discrediting American culture by degrading all forms of artistic expression. An American communist cell was told to eliminate all good sculpture from parks and buildings, substitute shapeless, awkward, and meaningless forms. I went to art college in Boston. I always found it amazing that I could get a can of paint, throw its contents at a canvas, and have some professors intellectualize what simply is an accident. Watching them talk about emotions and skill of an artist whose work consists of toilets glued together always left me respecting them less and less. Art, real art, takes talent that can't be bought in an art school. Just because it's in a museum today doesn't make it art. But then again, all it takes to get a piece into a museum today is to nail two obscure items together and put a Bush expletive on it. Eliminate all laws governing obscenity by calling them censorship and a violation of free speech and free press. If you get a chance, go to the North American Man-Boy Love Association website. I'm sure in the interest of tolerance, many of you publicly see no problems with grown men doing little boys. But within, it's got to gross you out. The ACLU represented NAMBLA despite a brutal murder and claimed they don't advocate sexual relationships between adults and children. What the ACLU does advocate is a robust freedom of speech for everyone. Sorry, lame argument. Man-boy oral sex and sodomy isn't free speech. Luckily, the ACLU lost that one. Emphasize the need to raise children away from the negative influence of parents. Attribute prejudices, mental blocks, and retardation of children to suppressive influence of parents. The oppressive influence of parents. You know, us stupid old heads who clothed, bathed, housed, and fed you from birth. We who stayed up all night with you when you were sick, took you to school every day, gave you what you wanted for almost every birthday and Christmas your whole life. We unconditionally went into debt to help you get your first car, apartment, college tuition. Yet should you do anything wrong, just blame it on bad parenting. Some of these liberals you call professors consider themselves your mom and dad, as they've done everything they could to reshape you, in some cases, into people who are now unrecognizable to your birth parents, and that is a shame. So in a few minutes, you will be considered independent. You are now what we loosely refer to as adults. You will find that things in the real world are very much different than in this isolated little fiefdom you call a campus. You will be held responsible for your actions. You will have to pay bills. You can be sued if you don't pay. Remember that the rules do apply to you, and you'd better choose your right to protest well. I guess this was kind of a downer, but I dragged this out so those still with their backs to me would have to keep standing a little longer. Good luck and congratulations.